The American people who are now tuning in for the second day of these proceedings are hearing about your approach to the law, to your role as a judge and as a potential Supreme Court justice, and they're also getting to know you personally. And we've had the opportunity to hear a bit about your family, your background. I think it's also appropriate that the American public hear a bit more about your brother's story. As I understand it, served the Baltimore Police Department, served in the U.S. Army. Before we turn to matters of law, will you please help introduce yourself and your family to the American public as you seek this lifetime appointment? Tell us a bit about him and his story.
Thank you, Senator. My brother followed in a long tradition in my family of public service. It was a core family value. My parents were both public servants, and two of my mother's brothers were career law enforcement. And my brother and I are almost a decade apart in age, and he, I think, looked up to my uncles who were often around in their uniforms, keeping their weapons away from the kids by putting them up on high shelves, and we looked up to them, and we understood through their service what it meant to give back to your community. My brother went to college, a historically black college, Howard University here in Washington, D.C., after growing up in Miami, and decided to follow in my uncle's footsteps. He could have done many things coming out of college with a college degree, but decided he wanted to be a police officer and went to Baltimore, which, as many of you know, struggles, like many cities, with areas that have a lot of crime. And it was a very stressful period for us as a family, because as proud as we are of his service, as much as we know it's important, law enforcement is a dangerous profession. And as family members, you worry when you don't get the phone call, when you haven't heard for a couple of days, when you hear about things in the news, in the community, you worry. And so I grew up with family members who put their lives on the line. I understand the need for law enforcement, the importance of having people who are willing to do that important work, the importance of holding people accountable for their criminal behavior. I also, as a lawyer and a citizen, believe very strongly in our Constitution and the rights that make us free. And what that means to me is an understanding that although we need accountability, although there is crime, we also have a society that ensures that people who have been accused of criminal behavior are treated fairly. That is what our Constitution requires. That is what makes our system so exceptional. My brother understood that as part of his work, and he also served in the military. He also decided, as many people did, to defend our country after 9/11, that he would go into the Army. And I remember when he made that decision, he had a college degree. He could have been an officer right away. He could have been a type of military officer that didn't have to actually be on the battlefield. And I remember saying, are you going to do something with, radio signals? Are you going to be behind the scenes? And he said, no, I'm going to be infantry, boots on the ground. He said, I believe strongly in the protection of our country, and if I'm going to be leading, I'm going to be out front. That's the kind of person my brother is. It's the kind of service that our family provides. And for me, what that meant was an understanding that to defend our country and its values, we also needed to make sure that when we responded as a country to the terrible attacks on 9/11, we were upholding our constitutional values, that we weren't allowing the terrorists to win by changing who we are. And so I joined with many lawyers during that time who were helping the courts figure out the limits of executive authority, consistent with what the framers have told us is important, the limitations on government. I worked to protect our country. My brother worked on the front lines, and it was all because public service is important to us.